Today I'm going to skip back to a chapter I read yesterday, in Zechariah chapter 11, just because I'm still trying to get back on track from that week where I got way behind. So, anyway, I'm going to pick up my reading in Zechariah chapter 11, starting in verse 1. Open thy doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour thy cedars. Howl, fir tree, for the cedar is fallen, because the mighty are spoiled. Howl, O ye oaks of Bashan, for the forest of the vintage is come down. There is a voice of the howling of the shepherds, for their glory is spoiled. A voice of the roaring of the young lions, for the pride of Jordan is spoiled. Thus saith the Lord my God, feed the flock of the slaughter, whose possessors slay them, and hold themselves not guilty. And they that sell them say, Blessed be the Lord, for I am rich. And their shepherds pity them not. For I will no more pity the inhabitants of the land, saith the Lord, but lo, I will deliver the men every one into his neighbor's hand, and into the hand of his king, and they shall smite the land, and out of their hand I will not deliver them. And I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me two staves. The one I called Beauty, and the other I called Bands, and I fed the flock. 3 shepherds also I cut off in 1 month, and my soul loathed them, and their soul also abhorred me. Then said I will not feed you. That dieth, let it die, and that is to be cut off, let it be cut off. And let the rest eat every one the flesh of another. And I took my staff, even Beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I had made with all the people. And it was broken in that day, and so the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of the Lord. And I said unto them, If ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said unto me, Cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver, and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Then I cut asunder mine other staff, even Bands, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. And the Lord said unto me, Take unto thee yet the instruments of a foolish shepherd. For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, neither shall seek the young one, nor heal that is broken, nor feed that standeth still. But he shall eat the flesh of the fat, and tear their claws in pieces. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock! The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his eyes shall be utterly darkened. So this chapter is kind of, it's really deep. To me, when I'm reading through this, I see a lot of prophecies of Judas Iscariot, and it's important to kind of keep that context in mind reading the chapter, because if you think that the shepherd is referring to Jesus, then it's easy to misunderstand a lot of things. He's talking about smiting the shepherds, and I really wanted to get right into the personal application, which has a lot to do with the context of the whole passage, which it's clear that parts of it are talking about Judas, the 30 pieces of silver cast to the potter's field. It's reasonable to assume that the rest of the shepherds are both Judas and maybe also the Pharisees at the time of Jesus, and also the rulers of Israel during the tribulation. They're leaders. They're spiritual and physical leaders. So what's happening here is these leaders, which Judas is a part of that corruption that's gone on in leadership in Israel. They're taking advantage of the flock. They're consuming the flock. They're destroying the flock. And they're blessing God while doing it. So they think to themselves, oh, I'm pleasing God doing this. And that's a perfect description of the Pharisees in the Gospels. They were hypocrites. They esteemed themselves holy and doing the work of God, but they destroyed the people in the process, and they exploited them for their own gain, to make themselves rich. And we've seen that take place in Israel quite a bit, dating back to even Eli. His two sons, the priest Eli, his two sons were doing the same thing, which is prophetically probably pointing to the same thing. We've seen this warning take place repeatedly throughout the prophets in Isaiah and Jeremiah. We see condemnations against the shepherds of Israel, and the shepherds refer not so much to actual shepherds, like historically maybe that's what he was talking about, but even then I don't think he was talking about actual physical shepherds out in the pasture. He's referring to the spiritual leaders of the people, of his nation. Historically and both doctrinally, he's speaking about the leaders of his people. Whether they're prophets, rulers, priests, judges, princes, whoever it is that's leading his flock, his people, or these shepherds. And it's interesting the connection we see with Judas, because Judas was the keeper of the bag of coin, and he definitely had an aspect of exploiting the people. His father was a Pharisee, a well-known Pharisee, and a hypocrite who Jesus rebuked, because it was that Judas's father was the one that hosted the feast where I think it was Mary. It was either Mary or it was one of the Marys that washed his feet. You know, there are two different. There was the one that washed his feet with her hair, and then the other that anointed his feet with oil. I kind of get them confused. But at one of those feasts, this was early on, it was hosted by, I can't remember the man's name. I think this was in like Mark 4 or 5, I don't remember. It's kind of off topic, but Judas's father was a Pharisee, and his father was the man who condemned the woman for doing this to Jesus. And Jesus is like, why? She's done a good thing. His father was the man who's like, oh, if he knew, surely if he were the Son of God, he'd know what manner of woman this is that toucheth him, or whatever. Yeah, and so his father was kind of a hypocrite as well. But not to get too off topic, the point here is that in verse 5 it says of Zechariah 11:5, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty, and they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. This is the main verse I kind of wanted to focus on. It gets into something that we can all learn from this, because maybe it's hard for us to fully understand the doctrinal application, but we can still understand the overall correction that God's sort of providing. So what these people are doing is they're slaying the flock, right? They're slaying the people, and holding themselves not guilty. There are a lot of times in life, and I'm sure we could all imagine or think of people who have done this, other people. Hopefully we could look inward and judge ourselves for having done this, because I know that we all do this. But to do something that clearly causes harm, whether it be to ourselves or to somebody else, but to not hold ourselves guilty for it. We don't hold ourselves accountable. We don't hold ourselves responsible for the things that we do. We go through life. There are a lot of people like this. They go through life just kind of recklessly, doing whatever they want, and blaming everybody else for their consequences, or just not blaming anybody, not wanting to take responsibility. And even worse, it says And they that sell them say, Blessed be the Lord, for I am rich. And so what's this? The leaders of the people were slaying their people, right? They were exploiting them, using them as slaves. They were selling them into bondage. And this has happened multiple times in the Bible. We just were looking at it at the end of, I think it's Ezra. We were looking in Ezra about how this happened. Oh, no. It was Nehemiah. The leaders were doing the same thing. They were selling them, making them sort of debtors, indentured servants, where they owe, and therefore, because they owe me money, they have to work for me for free until they pay that off, if they ever pay that off, because I'm exacting interest of them, and the rate at which they try to pay it off may not surpass the rate at which they're accruing interest. So it's exploitative relationship, and it's not good. They're oppressing the people and making themselves rich in the process. And what's bad about this is they're not, first of all, they're causing the people to perish. They're causing the people to be destroyed. And they aren't pointing the blame at themselves, which, that's understandable. But at the same time, they make it worse because they're blessing the Lord, saying, I am rich. It's like, God is good, I am rich. Now this is the part that really strikes home with me, because a lot of Christians do this, specifically pastors. And it's not just pastors, it can be anybody, but when we live in a way that's hypocritical of God, but hypocritical to the point that it destroys his church or his people, like we're taking advantage of them, harming other people, but we don't like to think about the consequences of our carnality, of our selfishness. All we like to think is, oh, I'm rich, I'm prospering, therefore I must be doing something right. God is blessing me because I'm prospering. But you don't look inward and say, I'm prospering because of my sin. I'm prospering because of my oppression of other people. And there are a lot of pastors like this, who their focus is so on their own prosperity that they've lost track of love. And that's really what this comes down to, is love. Because we talked about this last week. Prosperity is not something that we're promised in this life. I've talked about this repeatedly. If you like more information, just go back to some of the older videos where I talk about godliness with contentment, or something like that. But what we are promised and also commanded to do is to love. Owe no man anything but to love one another. You think about that. God doesn't care so much about money or interest or any of that stuff. But what he cares about is the love that we show one to another. And when all a person thinks about is their own gain, how are they loving anybody? They're loving themselves. They're loving gain. They're loving money. And that's what these people are doing. And the worst part is they're supposed to be shepherds. They're supposed to look out for the flock. They're supposed to look out for the people under their care. And all they care about is their own gain. They're willing to use everybody under their care for their own gain at the expense of all those people. That's not the characteristic of a shepherd. That's the characteristic of an oppressor. And that's who God is condemning in this chapter. Let's jump over to Galatians 5. Let's read verses 12 through 15. I would they were even cut off which trouble you. For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. So what's happening here is there are legalists coming in saying you have to have your own righteousness in order to be acceptable before God. And that's not true. He says it's faith and grace alone. Faith which worketh by love. The point, though, is we have liberty in Christ. But the problem is the argument of a legalist against liberty, against true grace, is that they say, well, you can get away with whatever you want. You'll never have any consequences. And no, that's not true. We have liberty, but it's not to do whatever we want. It's to serve one another in love. We're not bound to the law, being constantly condemned by it. Why? So that we can walk in love. And love is serving one another in love. It's a mindset of just giving ourselves for others. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And you think about that, because this isn't the only time it says that. It says it over in Romans 13, 8. Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. The legalists come in and they say, how can you please God if you're not keeping his law? But the truth is, we're not under the law. But we fulfill the law even the same because we walk in the liberty to love one another. Which means that we're not bound to the various specific commandments of the law, which is amazing, because if we were, we'd all be kind of screwed. But we fulfill God's higher law, which is the law of love, which is that we love one another. And the contrast to that is, but if ye bite and this is Galatians 5:15, but if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. So, the contrast to serving one another in love is that you're biting and devouring one another. And what these prophets, what these shepherds, the leaders of the people were doing, is they were biting and devouring the people under their care. They were not loving them. And it's sad to see that, but at the same time it's like, when we see that take place, it can often cause us to forget about showing love in return. When we see somebody else going out of their way to bite and devour, to take advantage, to exploit us or others that we know or see, because we can see this anywhere we look in the world. I was just watching, you can see it even in sporting events. You see how the players interact with each other. There's not, sometimes the players, there's sportsmanship, which is a form of love, and then there's just the taunting and reckless, hateful behavior, and it's like, that's not love. And you see it, and it can make you angry. And when that anger comes in, all it does is it works destruction. It works biting and devouring one another. So now we see the reciprocating effect where, because one or two people, the leaders maybe, chose to not walk in love, to not serve one another in love. Now it's reciprocating that in other people. Because when one person does it, it makes it harder for the next person to show love. But even Jesus said this. He's like, there's no reward to a man if he loves them that love him back. But there's a reward for them which love their enemies. And the same thing goes for us. It's like Paul even said, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I be loved. I am very willing to spend and be spent for you, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I be loved. It's like we're commanded to love, especially when we're not being loved in return. Why? Because it puts a halt to that reciprocating pattern of this devouring. You see, when we fail to walk in love, especially amongst each other, it perpetuates us destroying ourselves, basically. But when one or two people decide to say, no, I'm going to take this wrong, I'm going to let them get away with what they're doing without me getting vengeance or yelling at them or treating them bad, and in return, without me getting revenge, basically. When one or two people decide to do that, or just I need to decide to do that, then it halts the pattern. We're commanded to overcome evil with good. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. The best way for us to do that is by having this mentality, loving their neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. It says that back over in Romans 13. 10. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. What is ill? Ill is taking advantage of the person, trying to maliciously plan evil things to get revenge at them, to prod them, to just any kind of wrongdoing against the person is against love. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. And so having that mindset, when somebody does wrong to me or to somebody else, to have in myself no ill intent toward them, to only want to serve them, to only want to do them good, to bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not, to have that reaction, it ends that evil pattern of devouring one another. Especially in the church, when it can be so destructive in relationships and people. It's like anytime, even in a marriage is an excellent example, because what happens, people get carnal, right? It's going to happen, especially when you live with somebody. You're going to see each other's bad side every now and then. The problem is when one person does something wrong, when one person hurts or tries to do ill or say mean things or act maliciously against the other, whether it's just barely in the moment, they just do it without thinking. It's not like a pattern. For some people it surely is, but maybe it's just they weren't really paying attention, they weren't careful about what they said, and the other person is like, oh, I'm going to do that too, I'm going to get back at them. And all these little things, these little subtle jabs, they build up. And it's devouring each other. And he says, take heed that you be not consumed one of another. Because that type of vengeance, getting revenge at each other, tit for tat, it spirals out of control and destroys each other. It destroys the marriage. It destroys the relationship. It destroys relationships with other people and possibly the children or other family members. And it can destroy you as well. And it's like, why? Because love wasn't present. You put away love in exchange for doing evil to each other. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. What does that mean? It means even if they do ill to me, I'm not going to do ill to them. And so the lesson here is these shepherds in Zechariah 11, they were doing ill to the people. They were working evil. They were exploiting them. They were taking advantage of them. They were oppressing them. They were slaying them. But God said that he was going to save those people because he loved them. And our recourse when this happens is to pray. First of all, to forbear and to forgive. It talks about forbearing one another in love. You know, to forbear is to just hold off. It's like somebody hurts you. They do something purposefully. They go out of their way to spite you or to try and make fun of you or to humiliate you. I don't know. It could be any type of evil that people do to each other. And the first response is, oh, I've got to get back at that guy. So forbear. It's like, wait, just stop. Take a second. Pray about it, and then forgive them. You've got to let it go. And it's not just, forgiveness isn't just, oh, it never happened. It's bless them which persecute you. You have to have the mentality that I do not wish evil to come upon this person. I wish good on this person. Even if they've only ever tried to do evil to me or other people. And what is good? We're not talking about physical prosperity, although that is the same type of mindset. It's like, instead of saying, oh, I hope they get in a car accident, it's like, well, I hope they don't get in a car accident. But we're speaking, we hope, we bless them, bless the blessing with spiritual blessing. It's like, I hope that they can come to the knowledge of the truth, that they can have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, that they can have charity, that they can have faith, that God would soften their hearts, that they can also have love. Those are the things that we should desire always of each other, but especially when other people do wrong to us. that we shouldn't be desiring, oh, I hope they have a bad day. Or, oh, I hope that person gets what they deserve. Oh, I hope that they get, karma or whatever. Oh, I hope that somebody just comes and punches them. There's this idea, and I guess it's always been there in society. It's like, when somebody says something mean, it's okay to punch them, right? There's this whole thing about punching Nazis. And I'm not even going to get into the politics of that because honestly it doesn't matter. But the mentality is the same. It's like, this person has said something that's offended me, so therefore I'm justified in punching them. And that is never justified. It's never justified to get revenge on somebody because that's returning evil for evil. And it goes beyond that, tit for tat. They talk about the war in Northern Ireland. For many, many years, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, and the other groups, the Protestant groups, the volunteers, as well as the military, they all engaged in this, what they call the Troubles, the tit for tat, where so-and-so shot or blew up a car or stole or smashed out somebody's windows. So-and-so did this. Let's say, like, oh, the volunteers, they went and beat some guy up in the streets, so we're going to get back at them by beating up 5 guys in the streets. And then the other group is like, well, they beat up 5 of our guys in the streets, we're going to kill 5 of their guys. And then the other group is like, well, they killed 5 of our guys, we're going to kill 10 of their guys. And it's just like, it goes back and forth, it never goes anywhere. You destroy each other. It's like, and it's such a animal instinct of ours to retaliate. We want to retaliate against people that do us wrong. It's like, oh, defend yourself, right? And the best defense is a good offense. I mean, you watch MMA, how do people defend each other well? They dodge the blows and then they counterpunch. I mean, that's Floyd Mayweather, right? He's a master counterpuncher. He always counterpunches. He intimidates them. He discourages them from being aggressive by hitting them, punishing them for being aggressive. And it's like, that's how you fight. That's how you win a fight. But we're not here to win a fight. And if we were here to win a fight, then we'd still be screwed because we'd probably destroy the whole earth in the process. That's why the only one that's here to win the fight is Jesus Christ, and he wins the fight in such a way so that he causes people to be in submission with a rod of iron. He has a sword coming out of his mouth, but he rules with a rod of iron, which means that he doesn't have to destroy everybody because he causes them to be subject to him instead of retaliate to him, which is why he's the perfect king. And we are not. We're not here for that. We're here to love one another. We're not here to trade punches or to win fights or to win arguments or to win debates. That's not what we're here for. And so we have to be willing to let people sometimes beat us up, whether it be verbally, emotionally, physically. We have to be willing to just let them hurt us and to forgive them and only ever do them good in return. And that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around. It's a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around because it's not at all a natural instinct. But I guarantee this. When we walk in love, there is nothing that is more pleasing to God. It says in 1 Corinthians 13:13, and now about it, faith, hope, charity, these 3, but the greatest of these is charity. There are 3 things in this life that God truly desires us to have: faith, hope, and charity. Faith and hope are good. Hope is keeping in mind the true hope that we have in this life, that we never have to be discouraged because we know what's ahead. We have a hope of salvation. A hope of salvation not just for ourselves, but for everyone that we're involved with. And we will also have faith. We believe the Word of God. We believe the Lord Jesus Christ, and we preach Him, we speak Him, we edify others. But charity is that love in action. And 1 Corinthians 13 describes charity in great detail. And that whole mindset of love being that it worketh no ill to his neighbor, this is exactly what charity is described as in 1 Corinthians 13 verse 4 through 7. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. And all of those are in the context not just of ourselves, but in how we interact with other people. Especially when we interact with people that are trying to hurt us. And it says that charity is the greatest of these. Of the things that please God, charity, love in action, is the greatest. And so when we do this, when we allow ourselves to be taken advantage of, or specifically when we live a life that is not devouring one another, but is serving one another in love, that pleases God more than anything else we could do in this life. So, and it's going to take a lot of practice. I know for myself, it's hard. I mean, I was just watching the Chiefs game yesterday, and you see your player get, penalized or whatever, hit late, hit below the knee or whatever, and he's laying there on the ground, and the other players are up celebrating and like jumping, high-fiving each other. It's like, what the heck? It makes you so angry. It's like, how can these guys be celebrating that? They probably ruined this guy's season. That's such a I was going to use an expletive, but I probably shouldn't. It's not a good thing to do. And it makes me angry to see that. It's like, ooh, you feel that rage inside of, I feel a rage inside of me. But it's like, that's the world in which we live. And we have to be able to see that and remember God is the judge. But I bless and curse not. I thinketh no evil, worketh no ill to his neighbor. It's like, that person did wrong, but I'm still going to only do or think or speak good things to them, to serve them in love. And that's hard. It's really hard. But that's the pattern that Jesus Christ gave us. And it wasn't easy for him. He gave his life doing it, because he took wrong at the hand of everybody in this world. He was killed, sent straight to the lake of fire by our actions. So it doesn't get any worse than that. He took wrong from everyone in the worst possible way in order to show the love of God toward us. And so how much less should we be willing to take a little bit of offense when somebody does something temporary, something that just is in the fleeting moment. It's like, ooh, that hurts so much, but we show love in that fleeting moment because Christ gave us the perfect example where he showed love in such a more impactful and eternal way that we can never truly show this exact same magnitude of love in our own lives, but we can follow the example and let his love be manifest through us. Because in reality, every time that we show love, the love of Christ, we are letting his love show through us, because that's the only way that true love can ever take place, is if it starts with the love of Christ, following his pattern, believing him, and letting his love work in us. So anyway, just some random thoughts about what I was reading in Zechariah 11. I know I kind of rambled a little bit, but hopefully it's all good. So, love. It's a lesson for us all to follow. And this elaborates a little bit on what I talked about last week, and I think that's good. It's good that I'm getting similar lessons out of the various readings I'm doing every week to stay on one thing and kind of learn the different aspects of it. So, thank you for listening, and hopefully I get the next one out a little bit more on time, as opposed to this time, which was 2 or 3 days late. So